Welcome to the next installment of our reality team connection. We usually spend this time talking to a variety of experts, authors, thinkers, people who work in the field of disinformation. And this week we thought we would talk to you about something a little bit different. We thought we'd actually talk to you about Reality Team and what we do and what we're trying to get started roundabout now. So I will start off. I'm Deb Lavoie. I'm here with Rachel and Alessandra, and my screen is showing me very weird different things than it normally does. So forgive me, I'm looking around a little bit confused. So Facebook, they change how things work all the time, and like they don't like tell you. Anyway, so we want to talk a little bit about Reality Team, where it came from, and then we want to spend most of the time talking about this new idea we have that we hope you're going to be excited about, called Fact Flood. So Reality Team started up when over the course of the spring and the summer of this last year, we got more and more anxious about how intense the level of disinformation around the election was getting, and it felt like we needed to do something. And we spent a few months trying to figure out what that something was, and we knew it had to be very simple in order to be effective in the time between where we were, which was the summer, and the election, which was November. So we tried to think of the simplest possible thing we could do that would actually have an effect on people's, on how much of an effect disinformation was having on people. So the idea was this: well, disinformation is usually super simple. It's super light, it's super repetitive, and it's everywhere. And there are some people who are very into it. You know, it's really sort of won them over and won them away from more of a reality-based way of thinking. But most adults, most of us, are somewhere in a state of being confused, particularly adults, the people in the United States who are not news nerds. Like, we're kind of news nerds.
I mean, like, I don't think I would even identify myself as like a news nerd, because I don't remember the last time I I will read certain articles that pop up on New York Times or like that pop up on my newsfeed. But the amount of time I spend watching CNN is probably the 10 minutes I spend in my kitchen eating. Or
I never watch TV news, like,
yeah,
ever.
I won't ever really watch it. I haven't watched the local news in like forever. I haven't picked up a physical newspaper for, oh my gosh, like I can't even think about how long ago that was. So, I mean, our news comes through here. It comes through Facebook, even if it is New York Times and Wall Street Journal. It's
Yeah,
all through here.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that. And I'm old enough. I have kids who are, I have a teenager and I have a son who's 21, and they don't have sort of a lot of historical context. They don't have a lot of great judgment on this stuff. Not because, I mean, they're smart. They went to good schools and stuff. They're going to good schools, but they don't have a lot of skills to tell the difference between this guy over here who's saying one thing and this guy over here who's saying another thing. And even when they're skeptical, they're not sure. And as a result, they tend not to believe anyone and get sort of like, forget it. I don't want to know. I don't want to hear anything because everybody's lying. So again, getting back to that sort of like, what's the simplest possible thing we could do? It's like, well, the simplest possible thing we could do is that instead of sort of a piece of disinformation, vote by mail is fraud, being, super simple like that, and the answer being this like super thoughtful, analytical, 2,000 word article and whatever. We wanted to see if we could make little tiny truth bombs that connected to that sort of deeper analysis of why this is true. So we started experimenting in the 11 weeks between the time we actually got our website running, which, was a bit of a project, as you may recall, and the actual election. We built 90 of these counter narratives, and we were actually trying to be super clever, and we actually promoted them. In other words, uh, disinformation, a lot of those guys, they target audiences they think are likely to believe them. And we targeted audiences that just didn't read a lot of news.
Yeah. Like actually bought ad space for that.
Like, yeah, we actually bought ad space for that. We got a grant to run this as an experiment. And we did that, and we got a really, really, really positive response, and we're super excited about it. I mean, we got much better as we were going along. We started out, it was a little rough, in a lot of different ways. The visuals are super rough, and like some of the messaging was a little rough, but as we went through, we got better
I
and
just
better.
remember that the little fights that it used to cause, and then you would have like me, Hallie, and Alessandra just like in sheer panic because there was like little wars starting on these ads, and we were like, what do we do? Do we just let it go? Like, I just remember the panic. Like, there's people fighting on our page. What do we do?
Oh yeah, the first time people got really mad at us, we were like, but we're trying to be nice. Yeah, it was a challenge. So you guys came in. Alessandra was actually one of the earliest people on the team. You were here even before the website was here, I think, right?
Yeah, we didn't have a website yet. We were still honing the look and feel of everything, and we had to hit the ground running because so many issues were already in play.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think we've accomplished so much, especially as a startup, in such a small amount of time. It's pretty amazing.
Oh yeah, I am. It's so, the people on the team are amazing. And then Rachel, you came in because of somebody else who I begged and pleaded, please come help us, who I'd worked with in the past, and you knew her, and she said, oh yes, Rachel, need Rachel.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, because she knew that I had two big interests. Number one, we had been talking extensively about social media and social media disinformation and like the horrifying effects, and of course, putting on our doomsday caps and saying like, how is Facebook going to turn us into 1984? Like, that was like our theory like a year or two ago. And so she knew I was hardcore interested in that. But also, I had just recently switched over the past 4 years, transitioned out of non-for-profit work and, restaurant stuff into pre-med and going back to work in healthcare. And so what I was seeing that was making me crazy was the healthcare disinformation that was going on. Like the people who were targeted specifically regarding, especially at the beginning of the pandemic that we're currently in, just people getting targeted, Black and brown communities, so much misinformation just pushed at them, which was so scary. And for me, it went from a level of, oh, this is a joke, kind of jokingly, this is how the world's going to end, to, oh no, this is actually really, really dangerous. And it has life-threatening consequences. And there are people actually dying because of misinformation. And then the second she was like, well, there's a team that's going to do so, I was like, whatever it is, like, I don't care if we're going door to door and ringing on people's doorbells and handing out pamphlets. I'm in, because this is, luckily your plan was so much better than that, but so much better. But I was like, whatever it is, I'm in, because this is affecting people in a much more real way than I ever kind of expected. Because you don't know what it's going to look like until something like a pandemic hits, and then you see it play out and you're like, this is disastrous.
Yeah, it's really hard to solve problems as a society when you can't agree on the basic facts. I mean, it's just nearly impossible, and I think we've seen that play out. The uh, we were just talking about how things came together really fast and all of that stuff. Just to sort of throw out a couple of numbers, um, we on not counting only on Facebook and Instagram, we got 3.6 million views of our stuff. We've reached 1.1 million unique individuals, and had about 1 million engagements with our material. And those numbers, when I did the little projections, those numbers added pretty much a zero onto the end of my best case scenario. So one of the things that we demonstrated, if nothing else, is that there's really an appetite out there for this kind of information. And what was really notable is that our most engaged audience was actually young women on Facebook who tend not to engage with political information that much. We also had some other audiences that were well engaged. People over 55 on Facebook. By the way, we were kind of looking at people in swing states because we felt that they were getting hit the hardest by disinformation because those guys aren't dumb. So we were just basically trying to push back and make sure that disinformation didn't go unanswered. So in that 11 weeks, we kind of built out the team, went from sort of a skeleton of Alessandra, myself, a couple other people, built out the team. We got Rachel, we got a few more other people. We built the website. The first edition of the website, if any of you saw it, was, the word I like to use is rustic. It was rough. We got better at building our cards. We got better at having our messaging be, should we be clever? Should we be straight up? Should we be objective? Should we be, we were trying to be objective, but it wasn't necessarily working as well as we wanted. We got better at doing that. We got better at organizing our references and resources. It was a very fast ride, but at the end of it, we had done really, really well with this sort of advertising campaign. But what we realized is that we hadn't really engaged with the community in the way we wanted to. Like, we wanted to be talking to people and learning from people. We didn't really want this to be about us ever, really, at all. We wanted it to be about people who were tired of being confused about who was telling the truth. And we wanted to give people a way to sort of start to be able to tell, okay, if you are saying this and you're saying this, one of you is not telling the truth. Here's a way to begin to deal with that. So that's why we came to Fact Flood, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, Rachel, you were the person who came up with the
yeah. I think what happened a lot of this is we were going at a super breakneck speed leading up to the election. So I think what we were doing was we were like, okay, see something, make a card, throw it up there, see what sticks, let's do it, And then the election happened and we were like, okay, whatever the results were, whoever was pleased or not pleased, we have a collective breath. Take a breath.
Yeah. Yeah, because we were watching debates. We were
doing whiskey shots and fact checking as we were going. It was rough. It was really rough. But I think during the breath, we were like, okay, we recognize that we really had two different demographics because of how we saw the ads doing versus what we saw on our own page. And we were like, okay, the people who are following our page are actually people who are very similar to us in terms of they're convinced that there is disinformation. They know that it exists. They just are a little more hungry about how to actually identify it versus, where our ads were, where people were, kind of a little bit, I say, more passively absorbing information. And so we were like, we need to throw this out there. But we were like, I think all of us realized that, 14 people, which is what the Rail team was at the time, is not enough, because 14 people, keyboard warriors, 14 keyboard warriors will burn out, get exhausted. We're tired, and we're going to panic every time we try to come up against 100 comments, at a time. But if we had people who believed in what we believed in, which is that there are facts and there are ways to tell fact from fiction, and who want to know how to do that, then we could actually have people join us in this kind of crusade attempt to take back some of social media, because there's a horrifying ratio of bad information to good information, because bad information is sexy. Like, it's scandalous and it's easy to absorb and it's just more fun.
And it's compelling.
Yeah, it's compelling. Like, it's got like, it's almost like watching Olivia Pope put a spin on something. It's like, how, but it makes sense.
I love how I never get any of your references, Rachel.
Oh, Scandal. You must watch Scandal. Anybody who ever watched Scandal just can sit back in amazement at this woman who is a fixer in Washington, and she puts spins on things and will turn them around. And next thing you know, it's like, you've been poked. That's how I feel sometimes when it comes to this disinformation. They make it so good and so believable that you're like, I got poked. Like, this is crazy.
Yeah, I think the thing you said about changing the ratio, this was always kind of the thing. If, and I think of my kid here, if he sees, vaccine or aborted fetuses, or, vaccines have formaldehyde in them 17 times.
Yeah.
He's going to start to believe it, right? And so that needs to be answered, right? So there's a certain amount on everybody's feed. There's a certain amount of disinformation. And if we could just change the ratio, if we can just inject a little bit of counter narrative to what is false, we can make a big difference, because at least that's not a truth that's unchallenged, right?
Right.
And this is sort of where we started. This was the super simple idea that we started with. And I think that the idea of fact flood sort of recognizes that, yeah, but we, first of all, can't possibly do this alone. Second of all, we shouldn't be doing it alone. This is this problem. A lot of people share this frustration with how much disinformation is out there. And so then the problem was, or our challenge to ourselves was, so how do we make it so other people can help without sort of making them commit to 20 hours a week of, whatever the heck it is we do, right? And this idea is simple.
This came out of like all those challenges, all those viral challenges that you see on Instagram and Facebook. And I was like, if you can turn a pillow challenge into something that people will then turn around and participate in, and it's super fun and it's light and it's great, but all it really does is give you some levity for like the 30 seconds that you're doing it. Cool. But what if we could do something that would have some impact? So I started looking up like social media challenges for good, like for impact, for, and there was a ton of them, like hashtag trash bag Tuesdays, all this other kind of things that were going on, that people, and the ice bucket challenge, things that people were actually doing. And I was like, so this can make sense. People can do this. And like you said, we're 14 people, but we're also 14 people with very specific areas of study, so like, I am by no means a virologist. I have the exact amount of training that a pre-med Columbia student had. That's what I have, and the exact amount of clinical space hours, which means I can fact check some things, and everything else is taking a deep dive. But if you're one of those people who is reading misinformation and you can like, oh, that's not true, I can identify that. We're talking about expanding the broad ownership of expertise to everybody in the world who can say, no, there are facts, there's real things. And all you have to do in order to do that is to actually fact check somebody. But then that brought us into the next problem, which was like, well, how do you do that without amplifying the bad disinformation?
Yeah.
Like, how do you do that without
I
repeating?
want to say one thing though, is that you don't have to be an expert in
No.
anything in particular to
To
join
do.
the challenge, right? So we thought at first that this was a way to sort of get other kinds of experts involved. Turns out we have a lot of ways of getting other experts involved because we're not really first line fact checkers. We depend on other people's research, and we just there are people out there who do a very good job at research. What we do is try to simplify that so that people can like
We
see it and
distill.
understand it without having to get into the technical stuff.
We're good readers and good repeaters.
Right. We sort of message and massage what's there just to make it a little bit feel like less of a commitment to get the story, right? You can get it, and if you want to go deeper, all the original sources are there, right? So sorry, I just wanted to make sure that nobody thought that they had to be some kind of super genius in some area to do this. So go ahead, and then we'll show some pictures.
Definitely, yeah, definitely not. And I think that was the whole point, was that we were like, okay, if you don't want to be a genius, like have to be an expert and learn like 50 million things at once, but you still want to combat this. Number one, how do you identify what are red flags for disinformation? Like, that's something that everyone could and can and should learn. So once you can identify, here's a red flag as to this might not be true, then how do you check it? What are some places that you can go to that you're like, these people consistently, like the places that we go to for the fact checks, what are those places? And there's so much research, and I'm so thankful there are people on the team who are like deeply entrenched in this kind of research as to what makes something credible, what makes a credible source, what makes things trustworthy. And I think that's the biggest issue that we have right now, is that people have a big trust problem and a trust issue. So if we can identify what are trustworthy things and credible sources, then we can do that. So that's step 2. And then step 3 is, that means that you can notice the red flags, go to a credible source, see if that's real, and then now how do you turn around and combat what you saw before that was wrong? And that's what the fact flood is. So it's like, and I think Debbie had brought up, and Alessandra has also brought up, like a lot of times whenever you comment on somebody's, because I know I've gotten into like really, really bad Facebook fights. I think we've all gotten into really bad like comment fights.
Rabbit hole, yeah. It's an emotional.
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole. It's
Not me.
Like, it's horrifying. But like I've gotten into like, and I think, I have like so many friends who are get into consistent Facebook fights with people about whether things are real or not, or disinformation or true or not. And it's like, you don't necessarily have to spend your time. Number one, you shouldn't, because that's going to amplify that post. Like, the more you comment on it, the more people see it. Because
should we show people how we sort of simplified this into?
Yeah, so we can simplify it, because and now we're just going into the thought process, and that's fun.
Yeah. So I'm going to share this. Maybe people can see it. I don't know. The idea of the fact flood challenge is this: if you see disinformation online, ignore it. Anytime you try to argue with it, or put the mean face emoji on it, or share it, or comment on it, or whatever it is you're going to do, it's really just telling the platform's algorithm, oh, this is interesting, people want to see it. And so by responding to disinformation, you're actually spreading it farther. And of course, that's incredibly infuriating. So the right thing to do when you see disinformation is to ignore it, ghost it, look away. Then what you're going to want to do is see if you can find a credible source that deals with that information. So go find the truth. Do a quick fact check. There's several that we rely on because we think they are, they do a lot of rapid response. And they are invariably rated by every sort of media rating organization as reliable and reasonably neutral.
That and their truths corroborate. They're not the only one out there
Right.
speaking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So if you have, you know, if you're going to spend half a minute on this, go to factcheck.org or PolitiFact, or see if they've got something, or the two news outlets that are universally rated as absolutely reliable and absolutely neutral are AP News and Reuters. If you go to those places, you look up that information, most of the time you'll find it. If you go to our website, which is factflood.org, you'll see a link to other credible sources as well if you don't happen to find stuff in there. But that's the quick and dirty. Is there any truth to this? So number one, ignore the disinfo. Do not give it any algorithm juice. Number two, go do a quick lookup from a credible source. We'll talk about more about credible sources. And number three, fact flood the zone. So post a little excerpt of whatever it is you found on that site and the link to the site to your Facebook feed, to your Instagram, to your Twitter, to whatever. And also look at other hashtag FactFluck posts, because the more we amplify one another's little truth bombs, the more we tell the algorithm that these things are important, that disinformation over there, less important. This is how we change the ratio of good to garbage on people's feeds. Now, people might be concerned that there's opinion. There is opinion, but there is also, truth and lies. We'll get into that a little bit. But, I was trying to draw the simplest possible picture I could of what we meant by this. And you will observe that I am not an artist. However, if this is your feed and it's got disinfo, disinfo, puppies, disinfo, real info, shiny object, disinfo, our goal is just to push enough of that disinfo off the feed so that, it has a little more of this green tone and a little less of that aqua tone.
Yeah. More real info to disinfo.
Right.
Is always the goal.
Exactly. I wanted to share this because one of the things that's really challenging with disinformation is that a couple things. Number one, nobody wants to look like an idiot, right? And number two, people think that if they're smart, they are safe from disinformation. So the first thing I want to, we as a team wanted to tell people is, by the way, everyone gets got. Everyone gets fooled by disinformation. This is one that got me. And this is really dumb. This is like, there's no excuse for this. I've been studying disinformation more or less full time for about almost 5 years now. And I got by this. This was a video. It was after one of the Trump rallies where there was some problem with the buses. And I was totally ready to believe that this woman was some sort of, emotionally self-abusive woman who had convinced herself that of whatever. I was so ready to believe this that I just believed it. Whereas if I had just gone and clicked on her profile, I would have seen that she was a comedian and this was satire. So I just want to put this out there right here. I shouldn't be easy to fool. And yet we all get fooled either because we're careless or because sometimes disinformation is very subtle and sophisticated. We all get fooled. This is something that my son's friend, my son sent me. His friend posted this. This friend is, he's a bodybuilder. He's super into health and alternative medicine. And I think that in some way makes him vulnerable. I mean, I really respect actually what he does. I love this kid. but it makes him vulnerable to sometimes believing that, or he is willing to distrust medicine, right? He is willing to distrust uh, medical standards and sort of the mainstream views on things. He posted this, and my son showed it to me, and it's pretty clear here, right? Um,
Yeah.
there's this list of supposed ingredients in the vaccine, and this supposed translation of what those things are. And anyone will see these and know that this is, and at the minimum, a fairly alarmist interpretation of these things, because baby chickens are eggs, and unless you're a vegan, you probably eat a lot of eggs. So maybe this is worth sort of doubting a little bit. Um, and so there's this like incredibly alarmist thing, explanation by the person who posted this. Um, and so, you know, I don't know what the vaccine ingredients are, right? It's like,
It could be possible, right?
so
That's
I went and I was like, okay, I'm going to do some research. And the first thing I came up with USA is USA Today. USA Today is, clearly a very mainstream newspaper. Um, those, look, those, the partners we use that rate media in terms of their reliability and their journalistic practices, um, all say USA Today is perfectly fine. So I looked at what they had to say, and they sort of give the whole list of ingredients that are there. And by the way, note it. This has links to uh, the news about when the vaccine was authorized. It has a link to the letter to the FDA. It has links to sites that sort of make clear where its information is coming from. That's a really good signal that they are at least trying to be truthful and based on facts, and that they're being transparent about where their information is coming from.
I think that's a really good thing to point out now while you're talking about it, the different motivations behind messaging, the good faith versus bad faith.
Yeah, and ultimately, when we're talking about a credible source versus not credible source, on one end, you have organizations that are making a best effort to be credible. They are doing their research carefully according to best practices. They're super transparent about what their journalistic and editorial practices are. They will quickly acknowledge and correct a mistake if they make one. They will, they have standards in terms of, how they do fact checks, all this sort of stuff. On the other end of the spectrum, you have news organizations that either aren't making any kind of real effort to um, make sure they're telling the truth, or worse, they're actually making an active effort to tell lies. Those two types of organizations are pretty easy to identify, but there's a lot of stuff in the middle, right? That varies depending on how skillful they are at their job and a bias, right? Um, and trying to untangle that mess in the middle is like a lot harder than it sounds. And so that's why we don't try to make these determinations ourselves. We dug into it a little bit, and then we were like, no, that is a hard problem. So we reached out to a couple of organizations that actually do this for a real, this is all they do. One of them is the Global Disinformation Index. The other one is NewsGuard. And we basically looked for where both of those things agreed. They use slightly different models. And that's where our list comes from. We get a lot of questions on where does our list come from? That's where our list comes from. Anyway.
yeah.
So,
And see, something like this is very easy to take a look at, and you don't have to be an organic chemist or, take all these classes to understand what this is, because they've done a really good job of breaking it down, and if you were actually to look at this and their FAQs and then look at the original disinformation, you can see right away there is there's nothing in that is the same. That's some of the red flag, like that's like the first step, the red flags you brought up. It's like there's something in there that you had this saying that you were like, if it makes you stop and go whoa, like, or wow, you should wait to post it,
Yeah.
or wait to check it, because that the second you see this, your initial reaction is like, oh my God.
I know, that's terrible. Oh my God, look at that vaccine. It looks awful. It's terrible. It's got all these horrible things, right?
Yeah.
The more something makes you feel that way, the more you have to say, the more you have to sort of put on the brakes and resist the urge to retweet it or share it or whatever. Because if it's this extreme, you're going to want to double check that it's true.
Yeah.
So I saw this. I did this search. This was like, within 5 seconds, I got that article. Within another 10 seconds, I found this. This is because it was linked to from that article. This is actually on under Health and Human Services on the
and gov.gov, health, like health.gov, something like that.
health.gov.
Yeah.
.gov, .edu, .org. Those are good URLs to think about. You should always look at the URL that you're at and see if it sort of makes sense. Just sort of give yourself the opportunity to let your common sense come in here. And if it's, if the URL is 28 numbers and, Russian letters, don't be skeptical.
.tv.
Be skeptical.
A little weird.
So after looking at those two things, I just said, okay, people worry about vaccine ingredients. Here's an explanation of what's in a vaccine and why. And I just pasted the URL and called it Fact Flood, and I was done. So that process that we just spent 10 minutes talking through was really max 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Maybe 40, but well less than a minute. And, because Rachel was making sure she wants to, one of the things, part of Fact Flood, right, is that it's not about us. We're watching this Fact Flood hashtag. So if other people post Fact Floods, we're going to do our best to go in there and amplify them and share them and make sure that your posts are getting the visibility that they deserve.
Absolutely.
If you find a post that has a good thing, you could just sort of take a screenshot of, that's just sort of a little piece that makes a lot of sense. That's another way to do a good fact flood as well. So it really takes less than a minute to do a fact flood. We're going to be here watching the Fact Flood hashtag to make sure we're amplifying your work, make sure it's getting recognized, make sure we're doing our best to change that ratio, and make you feel like you're, becoming part of something. We encourage you to tag other people in your fact floods and encourage them to do fact floods. And we have a weekly newsletter that we're going to send out that'll have, some fun stuff in it, like, some interesting fact floods posts of the week, maybe, person who did the most fact floods that week, one that got the most shares, and also some of the stuff. Rachel or Alessandra, do you want to talk about, do you want to talk a little bit about dirty tricks?
Ooh, so dirty tricks. So one of the big things that we have tackled, and one of the biggest things that we wanted to make sure we were doing in Fact Flood was the red flags part, because that's the first thing that should make your alarm bells go off. So to really get well trained in what are the alarm bells, because I've gotten horrifyingly gotten by disinformation too. because of alarm bells that just didn't go off for whatever reason. So Dirty Tricks is the creation of another team member who, and his whole idea behind it is, how can you recognize those alarm bells, those, what should make your little spidey sense tingle so that you want to go like check on things. And so what we've done is taken a lot of really great research from other people in this space, like John Cook and Prop Watch and all these guys who really
have been on this
who've been on
show or whatever it is this is.
our little talkbacks, and they have tons and tons of information, like minute details about different ways that people can get fooled, like fake experts. How can you tell someone who's a fake expert versus a real expert? How do you know when somebody's using a certain rhetoric attack to make you think a certain way? And so what we're doing is, again, because that's our specialty, or that's what we're trying to get to, is how do we simplify them, make them super identifiable, easy to share, easy to digest, and that will make the first step of a fact flood easy for everybody. Is like, we can identify and we can recognize when something looks like crap, because sometimes it's hard to tell.
Like, catch it before you're about to be manipulated. And and worse, spread that manipulation out there to your circles.
Yeah. I don't think our goal here, we're not trying to make people sort of experts in 17 different types of logical fallacies. Really, I think our goal with that is to give people the sense that, if they hear an argument that's based on data, or they hear an argument that's supposedly supported by experts, these are the things that should raise a flag, right? You may not know right away whether someone's pulling your leg or not, or trying to trick you, but you will at least have a couple of questions to ask yourself. The goal here is that you should feel a lot more confident knowing, first of all, whether or not someone is trustworthy, or a piece of information is trustworthy. And if you're not sure, how to check. If you go to our site, factflood.org, so we made a page just for this Fact Flood challenge. We go into some of this stuff in a little more detail. And if you are confused and you can't find a good fact check on it, if you email us or at us on any of our social media channels, we'll help figure it out. Because if you can't do it and then we can't do it, we know really good people who can, who are professional fact checkers, and they will figure it out. So we're calling this campaign, thanks to all of you who answered our question about, what should we call this thing? We're calling that part of it Dirty Disinfo Tricks. So along with, with this Fact Flood challenge, which we're hoping you'll all take part in, we'll be sharing these dirty disinfo tricks to help you recognize a fake expert, or, funny little logic tricks that people will use to try to make you think that something makes sense even when it doesn't. And just, ultimately, I think the question is, who should I believe, and how do I tell the difference between someone who's fool me and someone who isn't? And I think we'll be able to give people just enough knowledge without making them do a lot of work to be able to recognize that stuff faster and more easily.
Right. It should be empowering. It's a community effort, and it's a, we want to stamp down as you said it a few weeks ago, we want to reclaim some of that real estate in our social media feeds. Yeah. It's being taken up by disinformation and misinformation. Get it back.
And we'd like to do it with you guys, with the people that are watching, with people that are out there. Nearly everyone I know is frustrated with disinformation, but isn't really quite sure what to do about it. And we were the same way, but we spent a lot of time thinking about it. So this is our next phase of hitting that and trying it. If you have any ideas or thoughts or feedback on the Fact Flood Challenge, we would really like to hear them.
Oh yeah.
We're going to learn a lot. Probably the first couple of weeks will probably hurt a little bit, but we'll get through that and we'll make it a success.
Yeah, that's the best part too. I think that as a team, we're really accessible to the public. We don't let a message go unanswered. We're pretty on top of it.
And
Yeah.
I think so we just genuinely like to learn what other people think, which is a lot of, for me, it's more fun to find out what other people are up to, what other people think, what they're seeing, than it is to hear my own voice. Because I feel like sometimes that, you know, especially what's going on now, we are just hearing a lot of, we're in our own little spaces and we're kind of talking to ourselves a lot. So I think, you know, bringing in the entirety of whoever would like to participate and whoever's listening and whoever thinks this is cool.
Walk on Main Street reality team, the broad world, the general public, anyone who wants
strong alliances in the last few months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, try a couple of Fact Flood posts. If it's hard, let's talk about how we can make it easier. If it's confusing, if you have an idea to make it more engaging, more interactive, we are definitely here for that. But start using that hashtag Fact Flood. If you use it, you will hear from us. We will be following and paying attention there. Give it a try. Let us know how it goes. See what you think about how we're trying to explain it on our Fact Flood page. See if it makes sense to you. Check out we have a page called Credible Sources, which tries to explain how we went about identifying credible sources. We do not think it is a definitive list. We think it is the best we can do right now and hope to evolve it over time. It's a very hard problem. And as soon as you get in there, it gets harder. The harder you pick at that problem, the harder that problem becomes. So, you know, we know that we'll learn a lot and get better, but as our team of, you know, the dozen of us or whatever that are doing this work, we can't possibly have as much insight as you all out there have amongst you, and we would just like you to be generous and share it with us.
Yeah. I like that. The community team effort. We're going to tackle it together. This is good.
Yeah. If you care about reality, you are a member of reality team.
Cool.
So,
and if you also want, if you just look up the hashtag Fact Flood, there's also a bunch of posts that we've already done on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So if you just for a little inspiration, they're all there.
Feel free to like or share or comment on those. Feel free to follow that hashtag and yourselves and see what other people are finding and amplify that.
We're really excited to get this going and really excited to get it started. So
we are really excited to get it going. So I want to thank everyone who showed up to listen to us chat about this. I want to thank Rachel and Alessandra. I don't think you can imagine how much passion and expertise and diligence and creativity and, thank goodness, humor. Anyone who knows me knows I have no sense of humor whatsoever, or it's so dry, it's like dust, right? These guys bring sort of joy and creativity and humor and all the things that we're going to need to make this successful. And I, you know, hope you get to know them and appreciate them the way I have. We've got a few other people on the team I hope you'll get to meet over time. They're all it's the best team of people I've ever worked with. I'm just so
Yeah.
Psych. No, I love you all. And everybody out there, thanks for being with us, and help us out. Try it out. Let us know what you think. In the next week or so, I know Christmas is coming up. People are going to be taking time off and that sort of thing. But we have a couple guests who are going to be coming on and talking to you. Some people who are from Georgia who have some pretty interesting things to say about Georgia and their view of what the election there means. And a few other interesting people come in and out of here as well. So I appreciate all of you that are out there watching, and Rachel and Alessandra, thanks for joining and making all this stuff actually work.
Thank you for starting it. You're amazing.
Yeah.
It doesn't get it. So high five, because you're awesome.
High five, high five. All right. I think we should stop here. What do you guys think?
Oh yeah.
All right. See you, everyone.